The first thing I learned about expensive weddings was that rich people hated visible hunger. They wanted flowers that looked freshly gathered from a mountain nobody was allowed to climb, music that sounded casual after 3 committee meetings, and servers who moved like furniture with pulse. I was good at disappearing when the room demanded it. A tray in my left hand, a linen napkin over my right wrist, my black vest brushed flat, my shoes polished enough to hide the cracked soles if no one looked down. At 29, I had carried soup through more engagement dinners than I had attended birthday parties, and I could tell from the way a family arranged its seating chart where the grudges lived. I worked for Dodam events 3 nights a week and took private lettering jobs during the day, painting place cards and wedding menus in a cramped room behind a print shop near Uljiro. My name was Seo Jun-woo, and my private ambition was embarrassingly soft for someone who spent so much time counting coins. I wanted to open a small studio that made tactile invitations and menus for people who could not read standard print. I had drawn the plan on graph paper, revised the equipment costs in pencil, and hidden the folder under my mattress because hope looked foolish when rent was late. My mother was in a rehabilitation clinic after a stroke that stole half her speech. My younger sister, Seo Hye-rin, pretended her university scholarship covered more than it did. Our uncle had signed my father's old repair shop debt into a new loan after the funeral, and the men who collected it had stopped calling themselves lenders months ago. That morning before the Kwon Choi wedding, one of them sent me a photo of Hye-rin walking across campus with a red circle drawn around her face. Under it, he wrote, "Be sensible tonight." I deleted the message after memorizing it, because keeping proof had never protected poor people by itself. Dodam's head manager, Mrs. O, inspected us in the loading bay with the expression of a general who had lost 3 wars to sauce stains. "No mistakes today," she said, tugging at my cuff as if she could stretch my sleeve into better breeding. Seoul Holdings booked the entire Imperial Silla ballroom. The groom's side has their own security, the bride's side has their own staff, and both families will blame us if the moon tilts wrong. Beside me, Bayek No-ul snorted into the collar of her chef jacket. She was a beta pastry assistant with wrists strong enough to knead dough for 3 hours and a temper she stored like a knife under cloth. She had been my closest friend since we both survived a winter buffet where the heating failed and a congressman threw oysters at a wall. "If the moon tilts wrong, I'm invoicing extra," she muttered. Mrs. O glared. I looked down because laughing would have cost us both a shift. No-ul knew most of my debts, not all. She knew about my mother's clinic and Hye-rin's books, but not about the photo. She had her own trouble. An older brother who used her name when he borrowed money and a culinary school application she kept folding and unfolding without submitting. We had made a tradition of pretending we were not drowning by criticizing luxury napkin folds. That day, the napkins were arranged into white cranes on black plates. "Bad omen," No-ul whispered as we rolled carts past a wall of orchids. "Cranes fly away." I almost told her I wished I could, then swallowed the thought because wishes had a habit of turning into bills. The groom stood near the head table before the guests arrived, speaking to a man in a gray suit while 2 guards watched the doors. Kwon Tae-jin was taller than he looked in business articles, and less handsome in the ordinary sense than expensive photography made him appear. His face was too still, his hair parted with exact severity, his black formal coat cut close enough to make every movement look intentional. He was an alpha, though nobody needed biology to know that people around him measured their breathing. He had taken over Seoul Holdings after his older brother died, but everyone in Seoul with a cautious aunt knew Seoul was not only a logistics empire. The Kwon family moved freight, controlled ports, donated to hospitals, funded police retirement banquets, and ruined men quietly enough that newspapers called it market correction. Tae-jin's marriage to Choi Yu-ra, daughter of Haksan Group's chairman, was supposed to settle a dispute that had kept lawyers rich for 5 years. The bride appeared half an hour later wearing a gown with pearls sewn into the sleeves and a smile that never reached the people serving tea. Her family arrived in a soft wave of perfume, cameras, and men who inspected exit routes. I had painted 240 name cards for their reception, including one for Kwon Tae-jin that I had rewritten 3 times because the ink kept catching on the heavy paper. Seeing him look at that card without touching it, I felt a small, absurd pride. Then a Choi cousin snapped his fingers at me and asked whether the Omega staff had been warned not to crowd the bride. Pride had always been an easy thing to step on. By 4 in the afternoon, the ballroom glowed gold, and my feet had gone quiet from pain. I carried champagne, replaced fallen forks, guided an elderly guest to the restroom, and caught 3 fragments of conversation that confirmed rich families were only poor families with better tableware. Choi Yu-ra's uncle told someone the Kwons would be domesticated by paperwork. A Kwon aunt replied to a cousin that Tae-jin had no talent for obedience, but grief made men practical. Near the gift table, a lawyer argued over a sealed envelope marked with the Kwon family crest. I noticed details because details paid me. A guest's left hand hovering over a pocket meant a phone would appear before the speech ended. A bride's mother touching a necklace meant she was angry and wanted no camera to record it. A groom who did not look at his bride during the family toast meant the marriage had already begun badly. Tae-jin did not look at Yu-ra even when she lifted her glass. He watched his father instead. Chairman Kwon sat at the center table in a wheelchair polished to a mirror shine, a wool blanket across his knees and a gaze that made younger men straighten. Beside him sat Kwon Un-sang, Tae-jin's cousin, smiling as if he had practiced sympathy in a dark room. When I leaned over to refill water, Yun-sang's eyes flicked to my name tag. Seo Jun-woo, he read softly. Your uncle is Park Gyeong-sik, isn't he? The pitcher trembled once in my hand. He smiled wider. Small city. Seoul had 10 million people. It only became small when someone powerful wanted to find you. The accident happened after the vows were rehearsed, but before the formal ceremony. A silver hairpin from the bride's dressing room disappeared, and the accusation traveled through the service corridor faster than spilled wine. Choi Yu-ra's cousin, the same man who had snapped his fingers, pointed at me because I had brought tea to the waiting room and because men like him preferred theft to have a poor face. My locker was opened in front of 5 staff members. Inside, under my spare socks, lay the missing hairpin wrapped in a cloth I had never seen. Mrs. O covered her mouth. No, Ewell said, that's not his. With such force, 2 guards reached for her arms. I thought of Hye-rin's photo, my mother's clinic invoice, the way our landlord knocked with 2 knuckles when he wanted to sound polite. If I protested too loudly, Dodam would fire me before dessert. If I stayed quiet, I would become the Omega who stole from a chaebol bride, and the collectors would use that shame to push me wherever they wanted. Choi Yu-ra's cousin clicked his tongue. A criminal at a wedding. How poetic. I lifted my chin because dignity was cheapest when it was all that remained. Check the corridor camera, I said. I passed the dressing room with both hands full. You'll speak when asked, he replied. Then Kwon Tae-jin entered the service corridor, and everyone made the mistake of becoming silent enough for truth to sound dangerous. He looked at the open locker, at the hairpin, at my face, and then at the guard standing nearest the camera junction. Show me the footage. His voice was low and unhurried. The guard hesitated toward the Choi cousin. Tae-jin turned his head by a few degrees. I did not ask your future in-laws. The guard left. The cousin laughed once dryly. Must we interrupt the ceremony for a waiter? Tae-jin stepped closer to the locker and picked up the cloth around the hairpin without letting his skin touch the metal. "A planted object is only useful if found by the right witness," he said. "You brought 3 witnesses before asking management. That means you were told where to look." The cousin's color changed. No Yul breathed through her teeth. I had expected anger, maybe impatience. Tae-jin displayed neither. He sounded like a man reading the temperature of a room before deciding whether to extinguish it. The guard returned with a tablet. The footage showed a Choi staff member entering the locker room 2 minutes before the accusation. Nobody apologized to me. Wealth rarely bent that far. Tae-jin dismissed the guard, told Mrs. Oh the hotel would pay Dodam an inconvenience fee, and turned to me. Seo Jun-woo. Hearing my name in his mouth felt like being entered into a ledger. "Wash your hands, then come to the south corridor in 10 minutes. "I'm still on shift," I said before caution could stop me. His gaze moved over my stained cuff, the opened locker, the staff pretending not to listen. So am I. The south corridor looked over the hotel's inner garden, where pine trees were wired with tiny lights and rain tapped against the glass roof. Tae-jin stood by a service elevator with his wedding boutonniere removed and crushed in one hand. Up close, he looked less polished. There was a faint mark near his collar where someone had gripped the fabric, and the skin around his left thumb was raw, as if he had rubbed it too often against a ring he was not wearing yet. "You were framed to test whether I would protect Choi property or Kwon liability," he said. "Congratulations, you were selected for a family experiment." "I'd rather decline the honor." His mouth did not soften, but the corner changed enough to suggest he recognized the shape of a joke. "I need you to leave this building with me before the ceremony begins." I stared at him. Behind the glass, a worker adjusted lanterns in the rain. "You have 200 guests waiting for you to get married." "That is the reason." "I'm a server." "You are also an Omega with a debt someone in my family knows about, a sister at Hankook University and a mother at Mirai Rehabilitation Clinic." The floor seemed to dip. I stepped back. "If this is a threat, make it clearer. I'm tired." His eyes lowered, not in apology exactly, but in calculation restrained by something harder to name. "It is information others already possess. I am telling you because I need a public scandal large enough to break this alliance before midnight, and you need legal protection before the people around my cousin use your debt to move you." I almost laughed. "That is the ugliest proposal I've ever heard." "It is not a proposal." He paused. "Not yet." I should have walked away. I knew that then, and I know it now. Sensible people walked away from alphas whose families held courts inside hotel ballrooms. But sensible people also had mothers whose clinic accounts were not overdue, sisters whose faces were not circled in threatening photographs, and employers who could survive scandal. "What happens if I leave with you?" I asked. "Cameras catch us. Choi Yu-ra's family cannot claim I abandoned them quietly. My father's counsel must delay the succession vote. I reach a registrar before midnight with a spouse outside Haksan influence." "A spouse?" The word tasted like metal. "You said scandal." "The scandal opens the door. A registered marriage locks it." I looked toward the ballroom doors at the far end. Music had begun, soft strings warming up for a procession built on strategy. "You have a romantic soul, Mr. Kwon." "No." He said it without offense. "I have 15 years of watching men use sentiment to hide ledgers." I folded my arms. "What do I receive besides disaster? Your mother's clinic will be secured for a year through a medical trust you control. Your sister will have university security notified through legal channels, not my men. Your uncle's loan will be frozen pending fraud review. You will receive independent counsel before signing anything." "Before midnight?" "Before midnight." "And if my lawyer says no?" Then I find another way and you return to your shift. That answer unsettled me more than pressure would have. I had prepared myself for coercion. A door, even a narrow one, required thought. I glanced at his crushed boutonniere, white rose petals stuck to his palm. Why me? Tae-jin looked past me, toward the corridor where his wedding waited like an open trap. Because you kept your voice level when they opened your locker. Because you asked for camera footage before begging. Because my cousin already knows your name, which means you are in danger whether I leave with you or not. Then quieter. And because you are not theirs. No-Yul caught us near the staff exit with my jacket half-buttoned and Tae-jin's guard carrying a garment bag that was definitely not Dodam property. Absolutely not, she said, planting herself in front of me. Jun-woo, I have supported many of your terrible decisions, including that winter you tried to live on convenience store eggs. But I draw the line at fleeing a chaebol wedding with the groom. Tae-jin did not order her aside. He waited. That, too, annoyed me because it made him seem less monstrous than I needed him to be. I pulled No-Yul toward the corner and told her the smallest, honest version. My family was already compromised. Tae-jin had information, and legal counsel would be involved. Her face changed when I mentioned heir. You should have told me. You would have tried to solve it with a rolling pin. I still might. She looked over my shoulder at Tae-jin. If he hurts you, I'll poison every macaron served in Gangnam. Please don't say crimes in hotel corridors. I'm a pastry chef. We speak in measurements. She grabbed my sleeve. Call me the moment you know where you are. I promised. The promise felt thin, but it was mine. As we reached the staff door, Tae-jin handed me a black overcoat from the garment bag. Cameras outside? I did not take it. I can be filmed in my own jacket. Your jacket has the hotel logo. It will cost Dodam. He placed the coat over his arm instead of forcing it on me. Wear it only if you choose. I hated that he kept doing that, turning commands into options when options were the one luxury I had forgotten how to use. I took the coat. It was heavier than anything I owned. We left through the side entrance into a storm of camera flashes that had been summoned too precisely to be accidental. Tae-jin's guard opened an umbrella, but wind drove rain under it, cold against my cheeks. Someone shouted his name. Someone else shouted mine after reading my tag, which I had forgotten to remove. Tae-jin stopped on the top step. I thought he would drag me forward, but he looked down at me instead. You can still return. Behind us, the hotel doors burst open. Kwon Yun-sang appeared with 2 Choi men and a smile sharpened for photographs. Returning meant the hairpin, the det, the red circle around Hye-rin's face. Leaving meant becoming a headline attached to a man whose family could swallow mine by breakfast. I lifted the overcoat's collar. The bus stop is that way, I said, because terror made me practical. For the first time, Tae-jin almost smiled. My car is closer. Of course it is. He offered his hand without touching me. I looked at it, at the cameras, at the groom who needed a stranger to ruin his own wedding, and placed my damp fingers in his. The flashes became a white wall. We walked through it together, not like lovers, not like fugitives from a drama, but like 2 people stepping onto thin ice because the shore behind them had caught fire. The registrar's office near Seoul was closed to ordinary people, which taught me something about Kwon Tae-jin before any marriage document did. Doors opened for him after business hours, but every person who opened them looked afraid of someone else as much as him. A lawyer named Moon Ji-suk arrived in a navy suit with wet hair, carrying 2 folders and the unimpressed calm of a woman who billed by the minute even in storms. I represent Mr. Kwon, she said, then handed me a card. I have called attorney Han Song-mi, who has agreed to represent you independently for tonight's review. Her fee is covered by a neutral escrow, not by Mr. Kwon personally. She is on video in conference room 2. You may reject every term. I looked at Tae-jin. You arranged that in the car? I began before asking you. That should make me feel manipulated. It should make you feel prepared. Attorney Han was a sharp-eyed beta in her 50s who asked me whether I had eaten before she asked about my debt. When I said no, she ordered rice porridge to the office and made Kwon Tae-jin wait in the hall while she explained the contract line by line. 1-year term, renewable only by mutual agreement. Separate bedrooms, no physical obligations, no public affection beyond what I approved in advance. My employment and private projects protected. My family benefits placed in structures that would survive divorce. Exit clause if Tae-jin used my debt, family, or omega status to pressure me. Confidentiality with exceptions for legal danger. Public role, spouse, private role, negotiated daily. It is still risky, Attorney Han said. Power does not become gentle because it is written down. I swallowed porridge that had gone lukewarm. Is it worse than what I have? She read the debt papers I had photographed months earlier and said, No, that was how I married Kwon Tae-jin at 11:43 on a rainy night, wearing a borrowed coat over a waiter's uniform, while the ink on someone else's wedding program was probably still drying. Tae-jin's residence occupied the top floors of a Hanam building with private elevators, quiet art, and windows that made Seoul look purchased. I arrived after 2 in the morning with my plastic work bag, wet socks, and a marriage certificate sealed in a folder I kept touching to make sure it had not turned into smoke. A house manager named Mrs. Im showed me to a room larger than my entire apartment. The bed had 8 pillows. I moved 3 to the chair because no human needed that many witnesses to sleep. Tae-jin stood at the doorway, not entering. Security will remain outside the private hall. I don't want anyone inside my room. No one enters without your permission. That includes you. His gaze dropped once to the threshold. Especially me. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt the strange exhaustion of being treated carefully after years of preparing for impact. He placed a phone on the console table. New number. Your old phone may be monitored. By your cousin? Among others. Comforting. No. His reply was flat. Accurate. I picked up the phone and found No Yule's number already saved, along with Hyerin, my mother's clinic, Attorney Han, and a direct line labeled House Office. You moved my contacts. Attorney Han approved the transfer from the backup you consented to. You say that like it makes it less unsettling. He considered this. It makes it documented. I was too tired to argue with a man who apparently flirted with paperwork. When he turned to leave, I said, Mr. Kwon. He stopped. At the hotel, why did you crush the flower? His hand closed once at his side. It was my brother's favorite. Then he walked away before that could become a conversation. The first morning of my marriage began with a wardrobe consultant, a medical trust packet, and a breakfast tray I sent back untouched because nobody had asked whether I disliked abalone porridge. Mrs. Im looked distressed enough that I felt cruel. It's not your fault, I told her. I just prefer toast in the morning, and I can make it myself. She blinked as if spouses of criminal heirs did not usually ask for bread. Tae-jin entered 10 minutes later, dressed for work in a charcoal suit, and saw me standing at the counter spreading strawberry jam on toast with a butter knife shaped like it had a family pedigree. Mrs. Im can prepare that. My hands still function after marriage. I did not imply otherwise. Your kitchen did. He glanced at the untouched tray and then at Mrs. Im, who had appeared in the doorway with the anxious timing of staff everywhere. Add Mr. Seo's preferences to the household file only after he writes them himself, he said. Do not guess. Do not replace. Mrs. Im bowed. I waited until she left. That was almost considerate. Almost? You turned breakfast into a policy memo. He poured coffee without asking me to sit. Policies are harder to misinterpret than moods. I bit into toast to avoid admitting that made sense. My old life intruded before I finished. Hyerin called, voice shaking. 2 men had visited her department office asking whether she planned to withdraw for family reasons. I put the call on speaker before pride stopped me. Tae-jin listened without expression, then asked her for names, times, and whether any professor had witnessed it. He did not promise revenge. He told her attorney Han would contact the university's legal office within the hour and asked whether she wanted campus security informed by name or only by incident report. Hyerin, who had once called all alphas men with volume problems, went silent. "By name," she said finally. After the call ended, I looked at Tae-jin across the spotless kitchen. "You asked her." "It is her campus." Most people would have decided for her. He held his coffee in both hands, the first ordinary gesture I had seen from him. Most people in my family are the reason I need a contract to behave decently. By noon, every entertainment site in Korea had a photograph of Kwon Tae-jin leaving his wedding with an unnamed Omega in a hotel coat. By 3, my name was public. By 5, Dodam Events suspended me pending reputational review, which was a polite way of dropping a cracked plate before a wealthy client complained. No Yul stormed into Tae-jin's lobby at 6 with my spare clothes in a laundry bag and fury in both hands. Security tried to stop her until I came down. "You got married?" she demanded, ignoring the marble lobby, the guards, and Tae-jin standing behind me like a weather system in a suit. "Legally, yes. Emotionally? Do not start." She shoved the laundry bag against my chest. "Your apartment landlord called me. Reporters are outside. I fed your fish. One died last month, by the way, and you never noticed because it was the ugly one." That fish had a name. It had a personality disorder. My laugh came out cracked. Tae-jin watched us with the focus of someone studying a language he had never been allowed to learn. No-Yul turned on him. "You, groom, husband, whatever title you're using today, he keeps receipts in a blue tin under his sink. If your people touch his apartment without him present, I'll make your entire family famous for food poisoning." Tae-jin inclined his head. "Mr. Seo will decide what happens to his belongings. You may accompany him if he wishes." She narrowed her eyes. That sounded reasonable. I dislike it. Often people do. I pressed the laundry bag to my chest, oddly warmed by the smell of my own cheap detergent. No-Yul looked at me, and beneath the anger I saw hurt. "You should have called before signing." "I know." "No, you don't. You think surviving alone makes you noble. It mostly makes you late." She left before I could answer, and that argument stayed with me longer than the headlines. The first Kwon family meeting took place in a dining room where nobody seemed to enjoy food. Chairman Kwon sat at the head of the table, smaller than his reputation but twice as sharp. Kwon Eun-sang sat to his right, charming in a pale suit. Tae-jin's aunt, Kwon Myung-hee, wore pearls and an expression of permanent injury. I wore a navy suit selected from 3 options I had approved after rejecting a 4th that made me look like a decorative apology. Tae-jin did not touch me when we entered, but he walked half a step behind me until I chose a chair, then sat beside me. That tiny adjustment did not escape the table. "So, this is the waiter," Aunt Myung-hee said. "Former waiter," I replied before fear could turn me polite. "Currently unemployed scandal." Yun-sang laughed softly. Chairman Kwon did not. "Do you understand what my son has placed you inside?" he asked. "A room with poor manners." Tae-jin's hand stilled near his water glass. I wondered if I had just shortened my life. The chairman looked at me for a long moment, then smiled without pleasure. "Teeth. Good. People with no teeth become expensive pets." "I'm not available for adoption." Aunt Myung-hee inhaled. Tae-jin said, Jun-woo has independent counsel. Any communication with him goes through Attorney Han unless he consents otherwise. Listen to him, Yun-sang said, already trained by his new spouse. The word spouse landed with theatrical softness. I turned to him. If training worked, rich men would behave better. For one brief second, Tae-jin lowered his gaze to his plate, and I had the impossible suspicion that he was hiding amusement. Then his father placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs of me leaving the hotel, my mother's clinic, Hyarin's campus, and Dodam's loading bay. Protection is expensive, Chairman Kwon said. Loyalty is cheaper. I slid the folder back. Then buy loyalty somewhere else. I'm only renting common sense. The cost of common sense became clear over the next week. My mother's clinic called to say the overdue balance had been moved into a trust requiring my signature for every payment. Attorney Han sent copies of filings freezing my uncle's loan. Hyarin received campus protection and reacted by yelling at me for not trusting her sooner. Dodam refused to reinstate me, but 3 private clients canceled and 2 new ones appeared under names that looked suspiciously like shell companies. I rejected both. Tae-jin did not argue when I told him. They were not mine, he said. They were my aunt's. Testing whether I can be bought? Testing whether you can be embarrassed. I can. It doesn't improve my handwriting. He stood near the windows of his home office, where rain streaked the glass and the city looked blurred. I had come to return a household credit card I did not want. He noticed the envelope before I held it out. Keep it for emergencies. I have my own account. Your account has 32,001. That is personal information. That is a security concern. No, Mr. Kwon, that is poverty. Many people have it. We still get to own our wallets. He accepted the envelope after a pause. How would you prefer emergency funds handled? I had prepared for refusal, not revision. A separate account with a capped amount, recorded as part of the contract, accessible without asking you. Done. Don't say done like I ordered noodles. Noodles usually require more negotiation. The room changed by a fraction. We were still strangers tied by signatures, but for the first time, he altered a habit instead of defending it. I returned to work before the scandal cooled because staying in Tae-jin's residence all day made me feel like a vase placed near windows. Dodam would not take me back, so I accepted a temporary lettering job at a small gallery in Seongsu that needed accessible labels for a ceramics exhibition. The pay was insulting. The work was mine. Tae-jin's security team followed me in 2 black cars until I threatened to label them as part of the installation. Piece 1, I told the lead guard, men who make coffee taste like surveillance. He called Tae-jin. 10 minutes later, Tae-jin arrived himself, which did not reduce the surveillance feeling. You cannot move through public spaces alone right now, he said outside the gallery, while visitors pretended not to photograph us. I moved through public spaces alone, while your family was still deciding whether I existed. That was before reporters learned your face. And before your guards scared away a gallery owner who already thinks accessibility is charity. He looked through the window at my work table, where raised print labels dried under weights I had brought from home. What do you need? Distance. 1 guard inside as a visitor, 1 outside without blocking the entrance, no earpieces visible, no following me to the restroom. The guard behind him looked pained. Tae-jin said, Agreed. Also, you do not get to appear whenever I complain. You called my head of security a furniture disease. A private complaint. In a group chat named Escape Fund. I shut my eyes. You monitor my group chat? No. Attorney Han added me to the emergency thread and your friend changed the name while insulting me. I opened the thread. No Yule had indeed renamed it Escape Fund and sent a sticker of a raccoon holding a knife. For reasons I refused to examine, Tae-jin had not left the chat. No Yule's subplot entered our marriage through pastry cream and disaster. She had finally submitted her culinary school application, then discovered her brother had used her resident registration number on another loan. The school requested financial clarification. She did not tell me until I found her sitting behind the gallery after closing, eating leftover choux pastry with the blank face of someone deciding whether pride was edible. "I can't ask you," she said before I offered. "You're already living in a gangster museum. It's more of a minimalist hostage aquarium." She almost smiled. I called Attorney Han, not Tae-jin, because I was learning the difference between help and dependence by practicing it badly. Attorney Han referred No Yul to a legal aid clinic that specialized in identity fraud. When Tae-jin learned of it through the emergency thread, he sent one message. "If Ms. Bayek requires a statement regarding her employment history at the hotel event, I can provide it through counsel. No pressure, no money, no heroics." No Ewell stared at my phone. "I hate when men I dislike behave usefully." It's unsettling, isn't it? Do not fall in love because he understands legal boundaries. I am not doing that. She looked at me with pastry cream on her sleeve. "You once cried because a bus driver waited for an old woman. Your standards are decorative paper." She was wrong, mostly. Gratitude had often disguised itself as affection in my life because gratitude arrived more reliably. I knew the danger of mistaking shelter for belonging. Still, when Tae-jin's statement helped No Yul keep her school application alive without turning her into his debtor, something in my judgment had to make room for a fact I had not wanted. The first public dinner after the runaway wedding was designed to humiliate us. Haksan Group hosted a charity auction for medical foundations, and Tae-jin had to attend or appear frightened. I went because the contract required 4 public appearances per month and because my mother's clinic was one of the foundations receiving funds. Attorney Han reviewed the appearance terms. I approved a single hand at my back for stairs and no other contact unless I initiated it. Tae-jin listened as if each boundary were an engineering specification. The ballroom was smaller than the wedding venue, all dark wood and soft lamps. Choi Yura stood near the entrance in a white suit, looking more like a prosecutor than an abandoned bride. "Mr. Seo," she said when Tae-jin introduced us, "I hope married life suits you better than service work." "Both involve carrying things other people pretend are light," I said. Tae-jin's fingers did not touch my back, but I felt him register the exchange. Yura's eyes cooled. "You must be proud. One night's performance changed your life." "It changed many people's seating charts." Across the room, a photographer lifted a camera. Tae-jin leaned closer, his voice low enough for only me. "Do you want to leave?" I looked at Yura, at the foundation banner with my mother's clinic name in gold, at the donors waiting for me to look grateful or ashamed. "No," I said. "I want the mushroom tart before your aunt sees me." His breath shifted once, almost a laugh. He guided me toward the trays without touching me. That small restraint, in a room where touching me would have strengthened the performance, unsettled me more than a possessive hand would have. During the auction, Yun-sang sat beside me, while Tae-jin spoke to hospital directors. "You're better at this than expected," he said, watching Yura bid on a painting. "My uncle said the same when I learned to forge his signature on school permission slips." Yun-sang smiled. "Resourceful. Tae-jin likes resourceful people until they become inconvenient." "Is that a warning or a family hobby?" "Both." He placed a small folded paper near my plate. I did not touch it. "Your uncle's loan will not disappear because a lawyer stamps a document. Debts have owners. Owners become offended. Then they should choose a hobby with less paperwork." Yun-sang leaned back. You think Tae-jin can protect you because he appears calm. His brother thought that too. The name of Tae-jin's brother had not been spoken around me except in fragments. Kwon Tae-jin, dead 3 years, official accident, unofficial wound. I kept my face still. If you're trying to frighten me, you're late. No, I'm trying to find out whether you frighten easily. I picked up the folded paper with 2 fingers. Inside was a copy of Hyerin's class schedule. Rage arrived with such clean edges that I surprised myself by smiling. Thank you. Yun-sang's brows rose. For what? Proof. I stood, crossed the room, and handed the paper to Attorney Han, who had attended as my counsel under the excuse of liking mediocre art. Tae-jin saw the movement from across the room. He did not come rushing. He finished his sentence, excused himself, and approached after Attorney Han had sealed the paper in an evidence sleeve. Do you need anything? He asked. I looked at Yun-sang, whose smile had thinned. Yes, I said. Dessert and a witness list. That night Tae-jin and I argued for the first time without politeness doing most of the work. In the car, he instructed security to move Hyerin to a safer route without asking her first. I said no. He said the threat had escalated. I said Hyerin was a person, not cargo. He said his cousin had crossed a line. I said powerful men loved lines because they could move them and call it necessity. The driver looked like he wanted to evaporate. Tae-jin went quiet, which I had learned could mean anger or arithmetic. Your sister may refuse, he said at last. She will, I replied. Then what? Then we ask what she will accept. He looked out at the dark river. When my brother refused protection, he died. The sentence landed between us without ceremony. I stopped preparing my next argument. Tae-jin's reflection in the window showed no dramatic collapse, no visible plea. Just a man whose jaw had tightened around an old failure. I'm sorry, I said. He did not answer for several seconds. Do not let sympathy change your position. You were correct about consent. I hated that he could say that while still sounding like it cost him. When we reached home, he called Hyerin himself and gave her 3 options. A campus escort she could schedule, a legal complaint filed under her name, or a temporary study room transfer arranged through the university without visible guards. She chose the 3rd and told him he sounded like a bank notice. After the call, Tae-jin sat alone in the kitchen with untouched tea. I stood in the doorway, understanding him differently and not knowing what to do with the knowledge. The quiet turn came 2 nights later because of a leaking ceiling in a room nobody used. I was looking for a paper cutter Mrs. Im said had been stored near the old library when I heard water dripping. The door at the end of the hall was unlocked. Inside, dust-covered shelves of legal books, shipping maps, and framed photographs turned face down. A bowl had been placed under a leak, already half full. Tae-jin stood on a chair in shirt sleeves, pressing a towel against the ceiling with one hand and holding a phone in the other. It was such an absurdly domestic image that I forgot to retreat. This room is not on the house tour, he said without turning. I was looking for equipment, not ghosts. Both are poorly stored here. I stepped inside. One photograph on the desk had escaped the face-down treatment. 2 boys stood beside a harbor fence, one scowling at the camera, one laughing with a white rose tucked behind his ear. Tae-jin at 16 was recognizable only by the seriousness. The laughing boy had his arm around him. Seo Jun, I asked before courtesy caught up. Toit. Tae-jin came down from the chair. My brother liked repairing things during storms. He said leaks were honest because they showed where pressure had been ignored. He took the photograph but did not hide it. The night he died, he called me from an engagement dinner. He wanted to leave. I told him to endure until the vote ended. His thumb rested near the white rose in the picture. I was 27 and already fluent in practical cruelty. I did not say he could not have known. People said that when they wanted grief to become manageable. Instead, I took the towel from his wet hand and wrung it into the bowl. "The ceiling is still leaking," I said. He looked at me then, not relieved, not healed, just present in a way he usually avoided. "Yes." We changed the bowl together until maintenance arrived. Nothing was solved. The next morning, I asked Mrs. Im to find a frame that stood upright. After the library, I became more cautious around him, not less. It would have been easier if seeing his grief had turned him instantly tender, or me instantly forgiving. Real information made everything harder. He had once failed someone he loved by choosing strategy over escape. Now he had chosen escape with me, but the contract still tied my safety to his success. I began sleeping badly. I returned to the gallery, finished the accessible labels, and accepted 2 small jobs under my own name. Tae-jin stopped offering cars and began sending route risk assessments through the emergency thread with a line at the bottom, "Your decision." No-Wheel responded to one with, "Why does this read like a weather report written by a judge?" Tae-jin replied, "Because weather kills more people than judges in winter." No-Wheel sent a raccoon sticker. Hyrin, recovering her sarcasm, added him to a separate thread called Brother-in-Law Pending Review. I told her not to call him that. She said legal documents disagreed. My mother, whose speech came in fragments after therapy, saw the headlines late because we had tried to keep them from her. She touched my wedding ring during a clinic visit and said, "Heavy?" I nodded. "Too heavy?" she asked. I looked at Tae-jin waiting outside the room, hands clasped behind his back, not entering because I had asked him not to overwhelm her. "Some days," I said. My mother patted my wrist with the side of her working hand. "Then put down when need." It was the clearest advice anyone had given me. The Choi family struck through money, as rich families often do when they want violence to look civilized. Dodam Events sued me for breach of confidentiality, claiming I had sold wedding information to reporters. The amount was large enough to be fictional. Mrs. O called me crying before the notice arrived. "I didn't approve it," she said. "The owners did. Haksan threatened to blacklist the company." I believed her and still felt abandoned. No-Wheel, who still worked there until culinary school decisions came out, was told to sign a statement saying I had acted suspiciously before leaving with Tae-jin. She refused and was suspended. She came to my old apartment, where we were packing my supplies under the watch of one discreet guard, and kicked an empty box so hard it collapsed. "I have wanted to quit for years," she said, "but I resent being shoved." "You can stay at my place," I said, then remembered reporters outside and laughed without humor. My former place, my storage unit with plumbing. Tae-jin arrived during the argument carrying a document tube. No-Wheel pointed at him. "Do not solve this with a check." "I brought your employment records," he said. "The hotel's corridor footage also shows you defending Jun-woo before any public scandal. It contradicts Dodam's statement. Attorney Han says you can use it for your appeal and culinary school financial review." No-Wheel took the tube, suspicious. "Why?" Tae-jin looked at me before answering her. "Because your choice cost you income." "And you feel guilty?" "No." He paused. "Responsible for the battlefield, not your decision." No-Wheel stared. "That is the most unpleasantly precise apology I've ever received." She accepted the records. Later, she told me she had passed the first stage for school. She cried for 8 seconds, threatened me if I counted, and asked whether Tae-jin owned any bakeries she should boycott on principle. As weeks passed, the fake marriage gained habits before it gained trust. I left notes on the kitchen counter because Tae-jin read documents faster than texts, and because writing by hand steadied me. He answered on the margins in small, severe script. Buy cheaper coffee for house. Staff coffee tastes like apology, I wrote. Specify brand, he wrote back. Stop scheduling family calls during my gallery hours. List gallery hours. Ask me like a human. Are you available Tuesday at 7? No. Wednesday? Maybe. It was ridiculous, and it worked. We disagreed about security, money, public statements, whether my old couch was worth moving, and whether 8 pillows were a moral failure. He listened badly at first, in the sense that he listened like a man preparing a countermeasure. Then he began asking one more question before deciding. I noticed because noticing was my profession and my flaw. At a press event for Seoryun's new logistics center, a reporter asked whether I had seduced him for money. Tae-jin's face emptied in a way that made the front row stiffen. I stepped forward before he could weaponize the room. No, I said into the microphone. For money, I would have chosen someone with fewer relatives. The room broke into startled laughter. Tae-jin looked at me, then let the moment remain mine. Afterward, in the car, he said, You handled that better than I would have. You would have buried him in a footnote. A public footnote. Terrifying. He looked down at his hands. I wanted to answer. I know. You did not need me to. I know that too. The old version of him might have treated restraint as loss. That day, he treated it as a decision. Yoon-sang's next move was courteous enough to be more alarming than threats. He invited me to tea at a members-only club through attorney Han, offering information about my uncle's debt in exchange for a conversation without Tae-jin's shadow. Attorney Han advised against going. Tae-jin advised against going with the expression of a man swallowing several commands. I went with Attorney Han in the next room and a recorder visible on the table. Yoon-sang poured tea himself. You are changing him, he said. People keep accusing me of that like I arrived with renovation permits. Tae-jin used to understand sacrifice. Meaning he sacrificed other people on schedule? Yoon-sang's smile remained. Meaning he knew the family survives when individuals accept discomfort. Your discomfort seems well upholstered. He laughed, genuinely this time. I see why he likes you. The statement irritated me because it assumed knowledge neither Tae-jin nor I had earned aloud. Yoon-sang slid a file across the table. Your uncle's debt was purchased by a Haksan subsidiary 3 months before the wedding. Tae-jin knew after the ceremony, not before. I knew earlier. Why tell me? Because my uncle, the chairman, plans to offer Tae-jin full succession if he annuls the marriage and places your family protection under Kwon guardianship instead. You would be safe, funded, and silent. He will present it as mercy. And you? I want Tae-jin weakened, not obedient. There is a difference. The file contained transfer records, signatures, and one photograph of my uncle entering a Haksan office. My hands stayed steady because anger had become a familiar tool. You're helping me, so I become a wedge. Yes. Thank you for your honesty. It saves time. When I stood, he said, If you stay married to him, you become the excuse they use to cut pieces from both of you. I looked back. Then perhaps we should stop being an excuse. I did not show Tae-jin the file immediately. That was my first real act of independence inside the marriage, and it frightened me more than leaving the hotel had. I took it to Attorney Han, then to a prosecutor she trusted with enough caution to make me respect her. I called Hirin and told her the full shape of the debt. She was quiet for a long time. I thought you kept secrets because you didn't trust me, she said. Sometimes. Mostly because I wanted one person in our family to breathe without invoices. That's arrogant. Yes. Also very you. We met at a cheap noodle shop near her campus with a plainclothes university officer at another table pretending to read a menu upside down. Hyerin brought copies of messages she had received from unknown numbers. She had kept everything. "I'm not a child," she said, pushing the folder toward me. "Use these." Noel joined us after a culinary school interview, wearing borrowed shoes and carrying 3 cream buns she claimed were emotional support. For an hour, my life looked almost like a life again. My sister complaining about professors, my friend insulting the texture of noodles, me laughing with evidence folders under my chair. Tae-jin did not appear. He sent one message. "Driver available if wanted. No action taken without request." I stared at the words longer than necessary. No Yule leaned over. "He's learning grammar. How romantic." "You are banned from reading my phone." "Then stop having visible feelings." I put the phone away, but not before replying, "We will take the subway, thank you." He answered, "Understood." That single word should not have warmed me. It did anyway, and I distrusted myself for it. The chairman summoned us after the prosecutor requested documents from Haksan. Tae-jin knew by then that I had moved without telling him. He did not shout. That might have been easier. He came to the gallery at closing, rain on his coat, and stood among ceramic bowls while I packed brushes. "You went to Yun-sang?" "Yes." "You gave files to Attorney Han?" "Yes." "You did not tell me." "No." His face revealed so little that I had to rely on his hands. They were still, which meant effort. "Why?" he asked. The question sounded almost plain. I placed brushes into their roll one by one. Because every solution in my life has passed through a man who said he knew better. My uncle, the lenders, Dodom's owners, your father, sometimes you. I needed to know I could act before telling you. I would not have stopped you. Now I believe that more than I did 2 weeks ago. He accepted the wound without displaying it. And now? Now I'm telling you, your father will try to trade my safety for your obedience. Yes, I won't be the leash. Tae-jin looked at the bowl nearest him, a repaired celadon piece with gold seams marking old breaks. My brother once told me the family loved using living people as signatures. Was he right? Yes. Then don't sign with me. His gaze lifted. In the gallery's dim light, he looked tired in a way status could not polish. If I refuse the chairman's offer, I may lose the succession vote. If you accept it, you lose me. I had not planned to say it that plainly. The words entered the room and stayed. Tae-jin's control did not crack loudly. He only closed his eyes for one breath, opened them, and said, "Then I refuse." Refusal had consequences. The Kwon Council gathered in a private cultural foundation, building owned by 3 shell companies and decorated with paintings nobody seemed to like. Attorney Han came with me. Tae-jin's lawyer came with him. My presence was disputed for 20 minutes by men who discussed legitimacy while avoiding my name. Finally, I stood. "I can wait outside," I said, "but if decisions about my marriage, my mother's care, my sister's security, or my legal status are made in this room, I will consider every person here a witness to coercion and name them accordingly." One elderly advisor coughed. Chairman Kwon looked almost entertained. Tae-jin did not rescue me from the attention. He let the room look at me and find me standing. Then he placed 2 documents on the table. The first dissolved any condition tying his succession eligibility to marriage. The second transferred my family protections into independent legal trusts beyond Kwon control, funded regardless of marital status. Gasps traveled politely. Aunt Myung-hee gripped her pearls. Yun-sang's smile disappeared for the first time since I had met him. "You would weaken your claim for a temporary spouse?" Chairman Kwon asked. Tae-jin's voice was even. I am weakening your ability to use him. You are choosing sentiment. No. Tae-jin's eyes moved once to me, then back to his father. I am removing bad leverage. The chairman laughed, rough and low. Your brother said something similar before he died. My brother asked to leave, Tae-jin replied. The room altered. I told him to endure. I will not repeat myself through another person. No speech followed. No music rose. Men simply looked at one another and recalculated the cost of a man who had stopped offering the person beside him as collateral. My active decision came 5 minutes later, when Haksan's attorney produced a prepared statement for me. If I signed, Dodam would drop its suit, my uncle would confess to loan fraud alone, and the Choi family would express regret for misunderstandings around the wedding. The statement also required me to confirm that my marriage to Tae-jin had begun from genuine personal affection, not strategic escape. It was a trap disguised as mercy. If I signed, I would protect myself by making the contract look like romance from the start, erasing every boundary we had fought to right. If I refused, the public scandal would continue, and the prosecutor's investigation might drag for months. Tae-jin looked at the document, then at me. He did not speak. For a man raised to command rooms, his silence was an offering. I read every line. My hands did not shake until the end. No, I said. Haksan's attorney adjusted his glasses. Mr. Seo, refusing may prolong public scrutiny. Then people can buy better hobbies. Chairman Kwon's mouth twitched. I placed the statement back on the table. My marriage began as a contract made under pressure. My family was threatened. Kwon Tae-jin benefited strategically from my consent, and I benefited legally from his. That is the truth. Anything real between us has to survive the truth or it deserves to fail. Saying it hurt more than lying would have. Tae-jin looked at me with an expression so contained it might have passed for coldness to anyone who had not seen him holding a towel under a leaking ceiling. The council adjourned without resolution. Outside, in the corridor, he said only, "Thank you." I answered, "Don't thank me for refusing to become convenient." Then what should I thank you for? I thought of the runaway wedding, the borrowed coat, my mother's hand on my wrist. For standing there and letting me speak. He nodded. Thank you for that. The investigation broke open slowly, then all at once. Haksan's subsidiary records matched my uncle's loan transfers. Dodam's lawsuit collapsed after hotel footage proved staff had been manipulated before the ceremony. No Yule was accepted into culinary school with a partial scholarship and celebrated by making a cake shaped like a legal stamp. Heirin returned to complaining about exams, which felt like victory. My mother's trust remained intact under Attorney Han's supervision. None of this made life clean. Reporters still waited outside the gallery sometimes. Strangers online called me ambitious, pathetic, lucky, shameless, or clever, depending on which photo they saw first. Tae-jin lost the first succession vote by 2 ballots. Eun-sang gained influence, then lost it when prosecutors connected one of his aides to the scheduled threats against Hee-rin. Chairman Kwon entered the hospital for a week and sent me a handwritten note that said only, "You are inconvenient." I framed it in the kitchen. Tae-jin stared at it for a full minute. That is not decor. It's a family blessing. It is an insult. In your family, I'm learning the difference is mostly stationary. He did not laugh, but he touched the corner of the frame as if testing whether it would fall. Our marriage contract, meanwhile, reached its first formal review. Attorney Han sat across from us in her office and asked whether we intended to dissolve, revise, or renew. The question should have been simple. The room smelled of paper, coffee, and rain on wool. I had arrived with an answer folded in my bag and fear folded under my ribs. "I want to dissolve it," I said. Tae-jin's face did not change. Attorney Han nodded and wrote one line. The sound of her pen was almost rude in the quiet. Effective after the independent protections are confirmed for continuation? Yes, my voice held. The medical trust, Hiren's case, the debt review, and my legal defense cannot depend on marital status. They already do not, Attorney Han said. I will confirm again. Tae-jin looked at me then. Is this what you want? The question contained no accusation. That made it harder. It's what has to happen before I know what I want. He absorbed that. All right. A foolish part of me wanted him to argue, because an argument would prove attachment in a language easier to resent. He did not. He signed the dissolution papers with the same pen he had used to marry me, then placed it on the table between us. The residence remains available until you choose housing. No deadline. No. No. I'll stay at my apartment after reporters leave, or with no wool if she forgives my couch. Your apartment ceiling leaks. So did your library. His mouth changed faintly. True. Attorney Han pretended not to hear any of this. Afterward, outside the office, I removed the ring in the elevator. Tae-jin watched my hand but did not reach for it. Jun-woo. Yes? I would like to ask you to dinner after the dissolution is filed. Not for cameras, not for family. He paused as if every word had to pass inspection. Only if you want. I closed my fingers around the ring until its edge pressed into my palm. Ask me after I move out. I will. And don't send a calendar invitation. That may be difficult. Practice. Moving out of Hannam took 3 days because I owned more paper than furniture. Mrs. Im packed kitchen notes with the solemnity of an archivist. The guards carried boxes labeled by my own handwriting. Brushes, winter clothes, failed samples, ugly fish memorial. Tae-jin was at work for most of it, or he made himself absent because he understood I needed the space to leave without audience. On the last evening, I found the old white rose photograph standing upright in the repaired library. Beside it was a new bowl under the ceiling, dry because the leak had finally been fixed. I left a note on the desk. Repairs should remain visible somewhere. Otherwise, people trust the ceiling too much. It was sentimental by my standards and structural by his, which meant we were meeting in the middle through architecture. No Eul helped me reclaim my apartment after reporters lost interest. She inspected the locks, the sink, and the surviving fish. You dissolved a chaebol marriage and returned to a place where the bathroom light buzzes like a wasp, she said. Freedom has acoustics. Freedom needs pest control. Hirin came with groceries and placed my mother's framed therapy schedule on the fridge. For the first time in months, my life fit inside rooms I recognized. Bills still existed. Work still tired me. Fear did not vanish because documents improved. But when I woke before dawn to grind ink for a set of tactile wedding invitations, the quiet belonged to me. That mattered more than I could explain to anyone who had never had quiet taken as collateral. Tae-jin waited 9 days. On the 10th, a letter arrived by courier, handwritten on plain cream paper. Mr. Seo Jun-woo, are you available for dinner on Friday at 7? No security inside the restaurant unless you request it. No cameras, no family, no abalone porridge, Kwon Tae-jin. I read it 3 times, then called Noel. He sent a letter? Of course he did. The man has the emotional technology of a treaty. Should I go? Do you want to? I looked around my apartment. The repaired table, the drying paper, Hirin's grocery receipt under a magnet, my mother's therapy schedule, the old coat from the hotel hanging by the door because I had never returned it. Yes, no Yule sighed. Then wear the green sweater. It makes you look less like an underpaid poet. Dinner was at a small restaurant near the river, not private enough to be suspicious and not public enough to be performance. Tae-jin stood when I arrived. He wore no tie. I noticed because the absence made him look less armored. "You practiced," I said. "The reservation was made by phone." Remarkable growth. He pulled out no chair for me until I raised an eyebrow. Then he stopped halfway, uncertain. I laughed, and the sound surprised us both. "You can pull out the chair, Tae-jin. Chivalry isn't coercion if I'm allowed to mock it." He looked at me for a second longer than usual. Noted. We ate grilled fish and too many side dishes. He asked about my studio plan. I asked about the succession vote. He said he might not win. I said my studio might fail. Neither of us tried to solve the other's uncertainty before dessert. Courting Kwon Tae-jin after divorcing him was less dramatic than being married to him, and therefore more revealing. He visited my studio, which was really half of the print shop until I could afford walls, and sat on a stool too small for his dignity while I showed him raised lettering samples. He did not pretend to understand everything. He asked why one paper held shape better than another, and listened when I explained fiber direction. I attended one Seo Jun Foundation meeting as an accessibility consultant, invoiced at my full rate after attorney Han threatened me with disappointment if I discounted myself. Tae-jin introduced me by profession first. The room heard it because he said it like a fact with legal backing. Hyerin met him for coffee and reported that he answered questions like a deposition, but paid for her drink only after asking. No Yule made him taste 5 versions of citron tart for her school project and declared his palate depressingly accurate. My mother called him Tall Kwon and made him water the clinic's windowsill basil when he visited. He did it badly. I corrected him. He accepted the correction with grave attention, as if basil were a board vote. We still argued. He still defaulted to arranging when worried. I still defaulted to hiding fear under humor. The difference was that arguments no longer carried the weight of survival. Once, after a reporter approached me outside the studio, Tae-jin asked whether I wanted legal action, security adjustment, or dinner. I said dinner. He said, that was not one of the standard options. I said, expand the form. He did. Months after the ruined wedding, I accepted a commission to design accessible invitations for a couple, marrying in the same hotel ballroom where my life had been rearranged by accusation and rain. I almost refused on instinct. Then I visited the space during setup and found it had become only a room again. The orchids were gone. The service corridor smelled of lemon cleaner. A new staff member polished glasses where I had once stood in a borrowed coat. Tae-jin came to pick up sample cards because he was nearby, though I suspected nearby had been negotiated with his driver. He stopped at the south corridor window overlooking the garden. Winter had thinned into early spring. The pine trees were bare of lights. "This is where you asked me to run away," I said. "Yes." "You made it sound like a business emergency." "It was." "It was also a little rude," he considered. "My timing was poor." "You were minutes from marrying someone else. Timing was the least of it." His gaze moved to the garden, then back to me. "Would you have come if I had asked gently?" I thought about the man I had been that night. Hungry, cornered, proud, terrified, still capable of demanding terms from a groom with bloodless hands. "I don't know." "I am glad you demanded a lawyer." "I'm glad you provided one." "I am glad you left when you needed to." That sentence reached me more deeply than any plea would have. I touched the window frame where condensation gathered under my thumb. "I'm glad you asked again after I could say no." Tae-jin stood beside me, leaving space between our shoulders. "Can I ask something now?" "Depends whether it requires notarization." "No." His hand opened at his side, palm up, patient. "May I hold your hand?" I looked at that hand, remembering rain, cameras, signatures, leaked ceilings, dissolved papers, and a letter written like a treaty. This time, no one waited behind us with a schedule, a threat, or a condition. I placed my hand in his because I wanted to, and we walked back through the corridor slowly, carrying invitations for someone else's wedding, while the garden beyond the glass filled with ordinary morning light.